Oh yeah, the media is going big time in order to clean up for this guy, which is really shameful. So first of all, they had the U.S. ambassador to NATO on all of the programs to try and clean this thing up. And it is just ludicrous the way that they are trying to spin it. Let's take a listen.
With me now from Brussels, fresh off the NATO summit with President Biden, is the U.S. Permanent Representative to NATO, Ambassador Julianne Smith. Thank you so much, Madam Ambassador, for joining me. Let's start with President Biden's comment yesterday that Vladimir Putin cannot remain in power. The White House said quickly that he was not discussing Putin's power in Russia or regime change. Was that comment a mistake?
Well, look, the president had spent the day visiting with Ukrainian refugees. He went to the National Stadium in Warsaw and literally met with hundreds of Ukrainians. He heard their heroic stories as they were fleeing Ukraine in the wake of Russia's brutal war in Ukraine. In the moment, I think that was a principled human reaction to the stories that he had heard that day. But no, as you've heard from Secretary Blinken and others, the U.S. does not have a policy of regime change in Russia, full stop. So this week has been remarkable. It's been historic. I thought the speech was completely pitch perfect. And I think this will set us on a good course for continuing to support the allies, support Ukrainians, and apply pressure on Russia to get them to stop this.
So he didn't mean what he said, but it was pitch perfect.
But it was pitch perfect.
Got it.
I'm out here doing cleanup, but the speech was pitch perfect.
But it was pitch perfect. So that's the administration. The media is actually running with it even more, saying it actually was pitch perfect, and what he said was exactly right. Joe Scarborough over at MSNBC put this up there on the screen. The line has gone out to these people, and they are trying to compare this to Reagan joking about bombing Russia. First of all, Reagan should not have been doing that whenever he was president and we were in the middle of the Cold War. He says, quote, Reagan knew what he was doing. He won the Cold War. So does Biden. Well, you know, maybe there is some mental fortitude comparisons between the two. Let's put this next one up there on the screen, which is that people are accusing CNN of actually being biased. Tom Nichols here says, quote, this is irresponsible. This chyron makes it seem like this is somehow a war aim. The chyron at CNN, aka the text down at the bottom, says, Biden, quote, Putin cannot remain in power. I mean, that's what he said. So stop. Why are they criticizing the media for accurately reporting that? Next is Bill Krystal.
Irresponsible.
Quoting the president as irresponsible. Or maybe the president is irresponsible. Here's what Bill Krystal says, quote, gaffes by U.S. president per the U.S. foreign policy establishment, as if he isn't a member of that. For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power. Joe Biden at Warsaw. And then he compares it to Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Yeah, those are not comparable in any way. And yet they are trying to cast him as some great, leader in history confronting Vladimir Putin. My personal favorite was this one, DJ Rothkopf over at Foreign Policy. He says a brief, cool-headed foreign policy analysis on why the president saying Putin has got to go is not a problem. Number one, it's true. So long as Putin is at the helm of Russia, the country will be isolated and its people will needlessly suffer. Two, offending a sociopathic mass murderer who has serially violated international law and has the deaths of tens of thousands is not actually the wrong thing to do. And then finally, this is another one of my favorites, Ian Bremmer. All of the people I'm naming, by the way, are very respected in the quote-unquote foreign policy establishment. He says, quote, a world where a man like Putin has control over thousands of nuclear warheads, vast natural resources, and the lives of millions of people at his personal disposal is a world we need to change. That's not a policy of regime change. It's basic humanity. And, we do actually have a final one from producer James. Rick Wilson, our Russiagators. He says, so Biden saying Russia needs regime change is an outrage, while Russians actually succeeding in causing regime change in the U.S. in 2016 is just fine. Am I reading this right? Has 11,000 retweets, which makes me want to drink some poison like that guy in the meme. But this is where we are, folks. The mainstream of the neocons on MSNBC and on CNN are not only saying that it wasn't a gaffe, that it was the best thing that the president could have possibly said. This is a mask-off moment. They want regime change in Russia, and they want the United States to bring the force of military power to bear in order to make that happen. They want an actual war with Russia. And as we continue to say here, what's the end, then what? In 1998, I would have said, yeah, I was like 6 years old. But here's what I would have said if I was here. I would have said, hey, it's a good thing for Saddam Hussein to go in power or out of power. But if you had asked me, should the U.S. military be brought to bear and we should spark a 20-year insurgency and a $2 trillion war, and actually we would end up causing the deaths of more people than Saddam Hussein and trying to get him out of there and end up splintering the country into three and turning into an Iranian Clyde state, would it have been worth it? I would have been like, yeah, no. And that's the difference, which is that, yeah, we can say accurately, I think, that the Russian people have suffered under Putin, that he is absolutely guilty of many of these crimes, of killing his political opponents, being an autocrat, all of that. But as we found out the hard way in Iraq, be careful what you wish for. There are 40th order consequences to these things. Who knows? Who else would replace him? How do you know it would be somebody who's close to the West? It could somebody be even more, Russian, Eurasian, Slavic, or whatever in his desire. So I think that's what the level of nuance that's missing from all of this, Krystal. And I finally really do understand how Iraq happened, in all of that hysteria from watching these people, because all of them were centrally involved. They have learned nothing.
That is definitely the case. I mean, this is one thing we talked about last week with the Ketanji Brown Jackson
Oh, that's right.
hearings,
It was a great monologue.
Where, you've got Lindsey Graham and you've got John Cornyn melting down over her defense of Guantanamo detainees and just exposing that they still support all of those Bush-era policies, that they've learned absolutely nothing. On the liberal side, rather than saying they were all shocked and outraged, oh my God, did you ever insinuate that George W. Bush was a war criminal? And rather than being like, yeah, because he was, they were like, no, she didn't really say that, and here's the context, et cetera, et cetera. That just revealed that, yeah, nothing has really changed in this town. And so I have no doubt that some of the people that we just cited, if they were really being completely upfront, they would say, yeah, we should actually risk that confrontation, and it would be noble, it would be the right thing to do for us to have a direct military confrontation to remove Vladimir Putin from power. Now, I do think the Biden administration, this I will give him credit for. He has been very insistent on resisting calls for no-fly zone, on sort of, he was reportedly the one who decided, this whole fighter jet thing is probably not a good idea. So he has been very clear from the beginning, we are not going to have a direct military confrontation. However, I think behind the scenes, the administration, what they're talking about is trying to use economic pressure to ultimately force Vladimir Putin out of power. And that's dangerous as well. And by the way, if that is actually your goal, our policies of indiscriminate sanctions are likely to make it less likely that that is actually the result that occurs. Because again, you're giving Putin the ability to say, your pain and your suffering is because of the West. They hate Russia. They hate you. They want to destroy us. They're, when we're banning sports and celebrities and anything that vodka, anything that comes out of Russia, you make it very easy for him to persuade his population that actually I'm correct and they just hate everything Russian and want to destroy us. So even if this is your goal, if you think there is no end game except Putin out of power, which again is what Niall Ferguson was saying, that some aides are privately saying, you are making that outcome much less likely to happen. And by your completely undisciplined, diarrhea of the mouth, on multiple occasions, you are also making that end less likely to happen. And most importantly, in the near term, you are making escalation beyond the war in Ukraine as it exists right now. You're making that more likely. We talked a couple times about this idea of gambling for resurrection. When you have a leader who's backed into a corner, who feels like their only move on the chessboard to avoid complete defeat and humiliation is to take some outrageous move, dangerous move that you would look at from the outside and say, this is completely insane. Well, you are making that outcome much more likely. And that's why this is so dangerous. But ultimately, you've got you've got one part of just neocon instincts, still having never learned the lessons of Iraq. You've got another part of just always wanting to cover for whatever the administration does, and you end up with this very toxic brew.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And look, already we see signs of some destabilization in Russia. The Russian defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, he was missing for 20 days. Clearly, probably there was some recriminations happening behind the scenes. He's gone ahead and reappeared. Many Russian generals have reportedly been killed, possibly on on the front, also possibly not on the front. These are all things of destabilization within the regime, very characteristic of a Russian leader who has his back against the wall and who himself is grasping for power, and it would not be outside the realm of possibility in order to try and up the ante. Everybody go and read the history of the Cold War. We, as Robert McNamara said, we came this close to nuclear war. The only reason that we avoided it was luck. Kennedy was rational, Khrushchev was rational. The only thing that saved us was luck in the end. I don't want to be put back in that position. And as they found out there, in 13 days, John F. Kennedy wakes up one morning, within 2 days, the nation is literally on the brink of a nuclear exchange. That's how quickly it can happen. And that's why when the stakes are this high, it matters in terms of managing the environment of which all of this can possibly occur. And unfortunately, with these media people, they've learned nothing. They have an immense sway over the Democratic Party and the Democratic population, and they're all over TV. I mean, there was a rally here in Washington calling for a no-fly zone, which Bill Krystal himself spoke at. So that's the level of insanity that we're dealing with right now.
By the way, trying to hold up Reagan as like the patron saint of great foreign policy is troubling in and of itself. And that tear down that wall moment is a bit more sort of myth-making after the fact than it was in reality a game changer in the Cold War at the time. The media didn't actually, he tries to say, the media
That's true. It didn't become popular to the 90s.
Right.
Yeah.
They didn't really even pay that much attention
to
the line. It didn't represent a significant shift or anything in foreign policy. In fact, what a lot of historians say is that he was trying to project this sort of like tough guy image because he was facing some pressure from his right flank over the fact that he was in dialogue with and was opening with the Soviet Union and with Gorbachev. So this was a way to sort of signal to the domestic population that, no, I'm still the tough guy. So anyway, the Reagan comparison, let's retire that one.
Okay. Hey guys, we're going to be totally upfront with you. This is the most perilous time that we have ever operated in.
It is so difficult just to try to sort through the news, but even more importantly, to bring you accurate information as this wave of lockdown and censorship spreads across the nation.
Yeah, look, if you can become a premium subscriber today at breakingpoints.com, you're going to help us build out a vibrant, independent media ecosystem which is free of mainstream pressure. We can't tell you how important that is at a time like this.
Yep, that's right. Go to breakingpoints.com to subscribe. We love you guys and we appreciate you so much.